because it's a problem that we don't just have in West Texas, we have it all across the country. I introduced a bill, wanted to make sure that we got that passed, but realized, as well written as that was, as much passion and urgency as we had around the issue, unless we could find a Republican majority who would work with us on this issue, then it was as good as the paper it was written on and nothing more. We compromised, which is a four-letter word in Washington, D.C. and in our politics right now, came to a consensus piece of legislation, impressed upon our colleagues the importance of getting it passed it unanimously in the House, got it passed in the Senate, and got it signed into law by the one man in American politics with whom I agree on almost nothing, Donald Trump. But we found enough common ground on this issue because we knew that this bill, which would expand mental health care access for veterans, would save lives and would ensure that we're fulfilling our end of the bargain as a country for those women and men who put their lives on the line in the first place. So I know that we can get this done. And I know from my Republican mother, who we convinced to vote for me in that last U.S. Senate election in Texas, that there's a way to compel and convince our fellow Americans to see beyond party identification and instead to count themselves as Americans first before they are anything else. I begin with this because the challenge that we face in this country, beyond all of the challenges, is that we are as divided as we have ever been before. And we have a president in the White House right now who seeks to drive us further apart, make us angry at one another or afraid of one another. Some of the things that he said, all Muslims being banned from this country as though they are inherently defective or dangerous or disqualified based on their religion. And it's hard for me to think of a time in American history where we've done that. I can think about the histories of other countries, other Western democracies who identified one people of one religion as dangerous or defective and then took action against them. I think about a president who talks about four women of color, all elected to represent their constituencies in Congress, and asking them to go back to their home countries, though this is their country. Or describing Mexican immigrants as dangerous, as rapists, as criminals, as drug dealers, asylum seekers, as predators, as animals, as an infestation. And the fact that all of this doesn't just offend our sensibilities, it really changes who we are as a country, our character, our actions, our policies, our practices. You don't take kids who just traveled 2,000 miles from the deadliest countries on the face of the planet and put them in cages unless you have successfully dehumanized them or allowed others to view them as something less than human. That allows you to take them from their parents, to send their folks back to the countries from which they fled, to lose the lives of 7 children in our custody and care just over the last year, to take punitive steps against people who pose no threat or risk or danger to this country or to any of us, immigrants who commit crimes at a far lower rate than those who are born in this country. Perhaps it serves some political gain or helps his prospects in the next election, but it is dangerous for this country because we see it in acts of violence, in hate crimes that are on the rise each of the last 3 years. The mosque in Victoria, Texas, that was burned down within 24 hours of his executive order attempting to ban Muslim travel. 22 people killed in my hometown on August 3rd, this month of this year. Somebody who in the manifesto that he published before he began that terror attack echoed the president's words of an invasion. And commentators on Fox News who talked about their fear of being replaced, that hatred, that violence, and that access to a military-grade weapon is what took the lives of our fellow Americans. So this is a challenge that we're up against. And not only is it existential for those who feel like they have a target on their backs right now, but our ability to make sure that we address the issues of education, paying every teacher a living wage and investing in infrastructure for our schools across this country, or healthcare so that you can afford the medication or take your child to a therapist or be able to see a provider or attract the providers here to this community in the first place. The environment and our ability to confront climate change before it is too late and it consumes us, freeing ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels and embracing renewable energy and the high wage and high skill and high value jobs that come with that. Our ability to achieve any of these things or anything else that is important to us in our life is being compromised, undermined, and will be destroyed if we allow this country to come apart at the seams. So that is why I'm here today, to make sure that we write nobody off, take no one for granted, involve every single person in this election, this campaign, and the future of this country. We saw at least a glimpse of what that might look like in Texas. We traveled to each one of the 254 counties of Texas, the bluest places in the state, your Houstons, your El Pasos, your San Antonios, your Rio Grande Valley, to make sure that they were not taken for granted. But we also went to the reddest places, not in Texas, but in the United States of America, maybe on planet Earth. We have you beat Bland County. King County, Texas voted for Donald Trump 96% in the last election. But we showed up in King County, and for the people of King County, because they're every bit as deserving of being heard, of being listened to, of being fought for, of being served, and we have no ability to do that if we have not first shown up for them, listened to them, and understood their expectations, and then sought to perform them. Last thing, as I was walking in, I was talking to Larry a little bit and Elizabeth about broadband internet and the need to invest and partner with rural communities. And I remember being in Texas where we won more votes than any Democrat before, one independents, one Republicans, in part because we showed up everywhere. And one of those communities was Silverton, Texas. And I was talking about the need to invest in broadband because half of rural Texas cannot get online. So try finishing your education or looking for a job, starting a business, or getting what you grow out to market if you cannot get online. And before I could finish my sentence, this guy stands up and he says, Beto, I was in first grade in 1937, and I can still remember the day that Congressman Lyndon Baines Johnson, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, connected our community to the rest of the world with the Rural Electrification Administration. Now, they didn't give us a handout. They didn't ask us just to accept their charity. They partnered with us and saw us as valuable and worthy, in our community as competitive as any other. He said, you don't know what it felt like to me to be able to read under electric light, just like the kids in Chicago or London or Tokyo or anywhere else in the world. And he said, I also want you to know that every day after that, my daddy was a yellow dog Democrat. Folks showed up, folks delivered, folks listened to us and treated us with respect. I think that is key to defeating Donald Trump in November 2020, but more important than that, and to end with where I began, absolutely fundamental to bringing this divided country back together again and making sure that we achieve our potential and live up to our promise. So thank you all for being with us today and for inviting us out and organizing this event. Really, really grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I would love if you have questions to answer them, or ideas or suggestions, or just want to tell me more about Bland and Bland County. I'm here to listen and to learn. Sir.
Texas is the largest supporter of integrated student supports in the classroom, communities and schools, and that partnership intertwined with their Department of Education. How would you go about replicating that model, putting someone in the school to help put together, collaborate with agencies to actually serve children inside of the school as opposed to children and families?
Yeah. Great question, and you've done your research. We were in a neighborhood in Houston, Texas, that had been hit particularly hard by Hurricane Harvey. If you all remember that, in 2017, 58 inches of rain dropped out of the sky, which is the landfall record for a single storm in North American history. But it was the third 500-year flood in that region for that neighborhood. And we were touring the neighborhood, and the neighborhood president, this guy Keith Downey, was talking about all of the impacts. Families who had built up equity in their homes, selling them for pennies on the dollar. Homes that had yet to be rebuilt. Of 5 libraries in the neighborhood, only one had reopened more than a year after Hurricane Harvey. And at the end, we were driving by Kashmere Elementary, and I said, well, this school has to just be a disaster then, given everything you told me. And he said, to your point, no, this is the bright spot in our community and in our neighborhood. You've got kids who are literally living and sleeping in the back of cars, who when they walk into the front door of that school are in the right place, and they know it, and they're made to feel that way because not only do they have world-class instruction in the classroom, Their entire social and mental and behavioral well-being is addressed in that school. It's a complete or a community school. And those teachers who in some cases are struggling because we're not paying them enough are funding not just the classroom decorations or the school supplies, but the meals for those kids who are on free and reduced breakfast and lunch but don't have a dinner to look forward to, buying a set of clothes for the kid who's shown up in the same set of clothes every single day and hasn't been able to take a shower because he or she is living in the backseat of that car. That school is all about every aspect of those kids' lives and being there for them, and the school was performing accordingly. And so I look at this as an investment that produces an extraordinary return well and above what the initial cost is to put in. And if we could replicate that, as you suggest, across the country, if we could expand that so it's not universal just for those kids who are 4 and 5 years old in kindergarten on up, but to kids 3 and 4 years old in pre-K universally on up. If we could make the investment in the technology, the infrastructure, but most importantly, the people, the counselors, the social workers, the therapists, the staff, those kids, over the course of their lifetimes, are going to do so much more than they would have otherwise. Academic achievement, economic achievement, the things that we can't measure but are important to our lives, the poems that they're going to write, the music that they will create, the works of art that they will produce, all of that comes through that investment. And I love that Larry began with that, this idea that we can have public education that is world-class in this country and is world-class no matter where you live or who you are. So thanks for asking. We appreciate it. Thank you. Other questions, comments, suggestions? Yes?
Okay, we're Appalachian. Appalachian doing it, the coal and like a drop. And even if they bring coal back, they're not going to bring back the drop, so the mechanization. Now we've got farmers in the Midwest having a hard time. We were trying to start small farms back up in Appalachia. And what are your plans for energy?
Yeah. So you mentioned energy, you mentioned jobs, you mentioned agriculture, just 3 real easy ones to start off with, right? So when it comes to the jobs in this community, you're going to be our best guide. Rather than Washington, D.C. dictating what the solution is going to be for coal jobs that are never going to come back, which we should be very clear about. And we've looked at the numbers and seen the decline well before the Obama administration, continuing through that one and into this one as well. Let's be honest that those are not coming back and that we need something that will replace that. What if we make sure, at a minimum, following your guidance, that we make capital available to the community? So doubling the size of community development finance institutions. So the next person who's going to start a small business here or a farm or a factory, making sure they have the seed capital in order to do that. We want to make sure that those workers that they hire are trained and ready for that. So ensuring that community college and an associate's degree is absolutely free for every single American. 4-year degree is debt-free for lower income and middle income Americans. And if you have outstanding student loan debt, that we reduce the interest payments to the lowest possible rate and forgive it altogether if you dedicate your life to some form of public service. That can be teaching, it can be working at a VA, it can be in local, county, state, or federal government. If you're going to put your talent to use for all of us, we are all going to make sure that you can focus on that and not have to worry about your debt. For those who choose to go into agriculture, the way one farmer put it to me, and it's hard to argue with, I just want to be able to make a profit. That's all I'm asking for. I don't want a handout, I don't want a bailout. I just want to be able to grow what will sustain my family, my community, and my country, and be able to turn a profit so that I can then pass this farm on to the next generation. Right now, especially under this president, it's very hard to do. These tariffs, this trade war, they've destroyed markets that farmers have worked their entire lives, maybe many generations, to open up, and are closed to them and the next generations that follow. So ending these trade wars, bringing these tariffs back down again, opening those markets back up, and having a farm bill that ensures that you make a profit on what you grow, and that we also incentivize environmental services like planting cover crops or using no-till regenerative farming so that we keep more of that carbon in the soil. Everyone, including in and maybe especially rural communities, doing their part to save the planet and make it healthier for the generations that follow us. I think that's really important. And then on energy, the third of those three issues, we absolutely, as quickly as possible, have to fully transition into renewable energy for everything that we generate, everything that we use that powers the lights here, the cars that we drive, our lives, the building materials that we use. Our plan says that by the year 2050, we will be at net zero greenhouse gas emissions. Halfway there by 2030. We'll mobilize $5 trillion over the next 10 years in order to do that, both an investment in the resiliency of communities that are affected by climate change, but also an investment in the next generation of renewable energy technologies, which I would hope would provide jobs right here in this area. And again, wouldn't it be great if we also found the entrepreneurs who are going to lead those businesses right here in this area? So I see all those things, from business formation and capital to job training and education to our energy policy, all being connected and potentially very positive for this region. But we're going to have to follow your lead, and that's what I would love to do as president. That's right. And we can't do that unless we show up, right? And have conversations and bring everyone in. Thank you for the questions. Other questions? Yes.
All right. Since 1932, the Democratic Party has stood for equality and economic opportunity, and that's why I'm a Democrat. And I feel like our policies all address that, but we don't put that message out in a way that people can understand it to vote Democrat. And what would you do about that?
I think you're spot on. I think our opportunity is to show that the policies that we pursue, a minimum wage that is a living wage, so that you work just one job in this country instead of 2 or 3 jobs. The ability to take time off to take care of yourself or your family. Being able to see a doctor not as a function of luck or privilege, but just as a human right, something that you can count on. It's kind of like that story of Silverton, Texas. We then, by pursuing those policies and then implementing them, show that everyone has value. Everyone's going to be competitive. Everyone matters to us. We used to be the party, and I think it's sometimes an open question now, of the little gal and the little guy, the farmer, the worker, the rural community, those who were competing on an unlevel playing field. We were going to level that for them, or partner with them to level those playing fields. Really, the Democratic Party, in many ways, like the Republican Party, has been captured by the corporations and the special interests, and the wealthiest who can pay for access and influence and outcomes. How else do we explain the fact that all of us invested in the medications and pharmaceuticals that are sold back to us at the most expensive rates on the face of the planet? You paid for the clinical trials, the research and development, you buy them for Medicaid, Medicare, VA, TRICARE beneficiaries, and yet you pay the most expensive rates. And it's because those pharmaceutical companies have been able to purchase access to the members of Congress who regulate their industry. Republicans, but Democrats alike. So freeing ourselves from that corporate grip, not taking PAC money and outlawing PAC money to members of Congress and holders of federal offices, ending gerrymandering so that we have greater turnover in our democracy, term limits so that you can't stay there forever. I feel like all that will make us more responsive to people again, force us to show up in rooms like this to listen to the people that we want to serve and represent.
Like the OxyContin, Purdue Pharma, and Wall Street, and these people need to go to jail. They just keep paying themselves, buying their ways out of there. Democrats have got to put these people in jail. All right, that's what we got to do to stop this.
Absolutely. So 70,000 people lost their lives last year to drug overdose deaths. 70,000. The marketers of these opioids, who never disclosed their addictive properties, who made tens of billions of dollars in profits, have been able to purchase complete immunity. No responsibility or accountability or justice, and yet we have 2.3 million people behind bars, including those for possession of marijuana, which you can, no matter how much of that you use, I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world for you to do, but you cannot overdose on marijuana. It will not kill you. And yet we have people behind bars for that, and nobody from Purdue Pharma or Johnson & Johnson serving a single day in a single jail right now. And it's going to be justice.
So So are you going to start naming names and say, I'm going to put this person in jail? I'm going to put this person in jail. You know, like lock her up with Donald Trump? Are you going to start naming names? And are you going to start saying, this person's going to jail when I'm president? I mean, stand for something. This person was a criminal. He killed 230,000 Americans. He's going to prison. So are you going to start naming those who run Purdue? Johnson & Johnson, they were just fined $500 million for doing
Right.
the same. So is this part of your policy plan to start putting people in prison who are poisoning Americans? Is that part of your policy?
The short answer is yes. That if you have impunity for those who break the law, whether it's Purdue Pharma or Johnson & Johnson or Donald Trump, then you have set a precedent that some people or some corporations or some shareholders are above the law of the United States because they've been able to pay for access, or their position of power is beyond reproach or touch or the rule of law. The day that we accept that is the day that this experiment in democracy ends forever. So
that's your first policy then that I've heard, that you're going to start putting people in prison. All right, you asked for policy.
No, but to be clear, there's going to be accountability, there's going to be justice, there's going to be enforcement of the law, and we are missing that in these areas right now.
And I agree. First of all, I'm just hiking the AT, and when I heard Beto was coming, I was actually excited. So after this, I'm heading back up onto the trail. This is a beautiful area of the country, absolutely fabulous. I'm from out west, Arizona, so we just have the desert.
Yeah.
You asked for
We
policy
have time for one more.
suggestions.
Okay. Yeah,
Just real quick.
Yeah.
I think you need to embrace Donald Trump. To me, he's the symptom. You need to expose the rot of the Republican Party because they are backing Donald Trump 100% of the way. He's just the spokesperson. Number two, you know how this is. You have a family. You need to beat up Bernie Sanders on Medicare for all because it's like putting 1,000 people into a little tiny room like this. What you need to say is, you're going to put all children on Medicare. That's going to save families $500 a month, right? You see the bill every month. You know how expensive it is to put families on health insurance. Put all kids on Medicare. That saves every family $500 a month. Number two, put all children on daycare, federal subsidized daycare. That's another $300 a month. Again, that's $800 a month. That is a bigger tax break than changing marginal rates. So say all children are subsidized by the federal government. $800 right there. It's a wealth transfer from the federal government to the states because these families are going to spend the money, sales tax. That's how you feed the state government. You need to beat up Bernie Sanders on Medicare for all. Infrastructure. What's the deal with infrastructure? That to me seems like a slam dunk. So it's almost like it's the neo-lib, neo-con symptom where it needs to be privatized. Yes, we're going to build highways, but it's going to be in private hands. What's the holdup on
And then,
infrastructure?
sorry, we only have time for one more question for
Okay, those are my policies.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. And
Oh, and red flags. You
Yeah.
need to embrace red flags because it's the police that are not holding up their end of the deal and getting these kids in prison. Just real quick, out on the AT, there was a young man named Sovereign. He killed one person, stabbed another woman. This guy was arrested and was put in jail. They let him go. This guy was a nutcase. He was threatening to kill his dog and kill all these people, but they let him go. He ends up killing one person and hurting a
I'll get
woman.
your contact information and
So,
I'm gonna follow
anyways, those are my
appreciate it.
policies.
Thank you very much.
Beto will follow up with.
These are just cases.
Found out what we want to talk about and how we can.
It's pretty
Yes. Really love the question. The question is how do we make sure that our cabinet, our government, our administration is reflective of real people all over this country, not those who can just purchase those positions of power or who have connections to corporations and special interests. I'll give you one example that affords us a wonderful opportunity. We've talked a lot today about education. Having a Secretary of Education replace Betsy Ross, who has experience in a imagine even as we write the next iteration of education policy, No Child Left Behind, succeeded by the Every Student Succeeds Act, that next version, if you had a public school teacher at the helm of that department who understands that high stakes, high pressure, standardized tests in no way effectively determine that child's performance or that teacher's potential. If we made sure that we were listening to teachers as we innovate in curriculum, in dual language education like we have in El Paso, and making sure that our public schools are world-class education facilities, that there'd be no stop in this country. So I could care less about that secretary's connections or money. What I want to know is that she's got that experience and wants to bring it to bear. Let's do the same for the other cabinet positions to ensure that we've got the diversity and genius of America in our country. Thank you for asking. All right. Cynthia Thomas, that was going to be our last question, but we're going to hang out for just a little bit. For anyone who'd like to say hello.